Press record. I'm Jill Schimmel with the Division of Multilingual Learners. I'm so glad you're here for this. So many of you I know, I've gotten to work with you, gotten to know your schools, perhaps through the Seal of Biliteracy. I'm just very excited you're here for this 4-session series. I apologize for all the emails and the Outlook invites. We will stay on Zoom. Zoom plays nicely with Macs and people from outside New York City DOE, so we're going to stick with Zoom. And we're here for 4 sessions. So I want to real quickly, because we are here to learn from our expert in Spanish for Heritage Speakers program, Kim Potowski, PhD from University of Illinois at Chicago. So we're here to learn from her, and then sessions 3 and 4 from Nancy Dominguez-Fret. But I do want to take time to connect as a community before we learn from Kim. So I'm interested in hearing from you. You all signed up for you shared a little information about your students, who you think might be in your first class. All of you are eager to better support your heritage speakers, who are your students who have a connection to the language being taught, right? So how are you stepping into our community? I also want to acknowledge that a lot of assistant principals and people from the district office are here, as well as teachers. So thank you for making the time for this learning together. And so we do have a Jamboard, and we all know that Jamboard is disappearing after October, but I still think it's a pretty powerful way to connect and keep our ideas. So I'm going to ask you to take let's take 5 minutes to introduce yourself on the Jamboard with your colleague, right? So Araceli and Ms. Morales, you're here together. Maybe you can put a sticky describing Esperanza. And the prompts that I'm hoping you can put on the Jamboard is so Araceli and Luisa Morales from Esperanza Prep, our school is blank, or our students are blank. And this is a way to get to know you, your school, and who your students are. Does that sound good? So hopefully you all remember how to use Jamboard. I have an anonymous duck. All of you should be able to edit the Jamboard. The left side under, oh, great, someone already moved that. We're gonna move that back. So left side under the arrow is sticky note. You can make it your favorite color, and then you can type here, okay? And then do that. So let's take 5 minutes. So we have frames 1 and frame 2. Use either one.
Jill, you should check the team link because there was some participants there.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna go over there for a second, actually. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate you. Okay.
Sorry, can you put the prompt again on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please. Okay, I will. Thank you.
Jill, would you like me to hop into that meeting and let people know?
Yes, would
that
you
help
like
you?
to do so? Yes,
Sure,
thank you.
I can help you with that. Okay, I'll be
I
back.
really appreciate that. Thank you.
Maybe you can copy these
Oh,
prompts
hi,
and also
Tammy.
put them in the chat if that helps.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tammy. Glad to see all of you here. I'm going to put in the chat. We're on the Jamboard right now, just introducing ourselves. Maybe 2 more minutes. I will message her. So exciting to see. Glad Alexa's here. Awesome. Can use frame 2 also if you'd like. But Nancy. Excellent. Okay. So Kim, you'll get to meet all the amazing folks here representing. We had folks from 16 different schools register, mostly preparing for Spanish for Heritage Speakers or Spanish for Spanish Speakers programs. We do go back and forth on whether you would call it Spanish for Heritage Speakers. We'll talk about Heritage Speakers. And the first Mandarin for Heritage Speakers program in New York City from MS 158 and Districts 26, which is really exciting. And we also have colleagues from the central office, from the district teams. So it's really exciting to see everyone here. So your students, 70% Latinx. Yep. CTE school, right? So students. This will be a new way of learning languages for your students. It's more linguistically and culturally responsive and appropriately challenging for these students. And we're going to hear from Kim exactly why. So I'm going to please do leave the Jamboard open and continue to add your ideas on here. We're not going to use it too much today, but we will use it through these 4 sessions. Again, you can introduce yourself on slide 2 as well. But we have 4 boroughs represented, Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, and Bronx, which is really exciting. And our Deputy Superintendent for Queens North is here as well. So thank you very much for being here. Because we want to make sure Kim has time to share her expertise, this is the plan. We connected as a community, walk you through the series objectives, and then we'll learn from Kim about who our heritage speakers are, different profiles with small group discussion, and then looking ahead to our next session. So our work together is 4 sessions. I will have to update the invites a little bit because the 3rd session, I do have a conflict actually with a New York State visit to our schools. So it will be today, Wednesday, May 8th, tomorrow, next Wednesday, May 15th, then the 30th, it will be a Thursday. So I'll make sure you have that. June 5th are for learning sessions. Please do mute yourself if you please. And turn your camera on. It's always great to see all of you. May to June will guide you through how you're assessing your students, really thinking about their profiles. Then after the May 15th session, you'll be able to sign up for coaching conversations with Nancy Dominguez-Frett. She's going to present sessions 3 and 4. Then continued planning. We'll do some planning. Your cohort 2, you might hear yourself referred to as cohort 2. Right now, 6 cohort 1 schools opened new programs this year, and we're learning so much from them. So hopefully you'll all come together for planning in the summer. It's optional, but highly recommended. because we'll talk about the curriculum. And then we'd love to continue to come together. This year, the cohort 1 schools come together for monthly Zoom meetings where we talk through how it's going. We kind of unpack a lesson together, think about how we're teaching grammar to our students in a respectful way, things like that. And this is the arc of learning. Again, these 4 sessions today, we're learning from Kim with these, and then coaching throughout the remainder of the year. So this is Kim Potowski, PhD. We're going to learn from her in a minute, and she has an expansive profile and expertise. I'm so happy to have connected with her. I think I just emailed you a few years ago, Kim, and said, hey, I found your research. I need to create a document, and you helped with the brief, and you've just been a real mentor and friend to all of us in New York City. She's from Long Island herself, so loves being here. So we'll learn from her. And she's authored and edited over 12 different books. And Cultivando Jardines are activities related to that. And it's really exciting to think about just cultivating these students. Nancy Dominguez-Fret will be with us for sessions 3 and 4, and she'll be providing coaching to you throughout. So it's really exciting. She'll be doing a lot of work about testimonials and how we get our students to share their stories and feel proud of who they are. Our students in New York City, as you know, nearly 1 million students, and we have about over 150 home languages represented, and we have nearly 200,000 students who speak the home language of Spanish, right? And they're from various countries, so they have such linguistic diversity, variaciones léxicas, in the way they say certain words. So these classes are going to be a way for them to shine, to have conversations about their own language and culture. And yeah, so these are our stats for New York City. And then these courses are a real rigorous way for students to learn. They adopt a language arts approach. And so the Seal of Biliteracy, if you're a high school and you're not yet offering the Seal of Biliteracy, we'll ask you to do so, maybe not in your first year with the Heritage Program, but definitely by your second year. So your students see themselves taking this rigorous course. Maybe they're prepared for advanced placement after 1 year of Heritage Spanish. They should get the Seal of Biliteracy. And right now we have 125 high schools participating in the Seal. I'm going very fast. And so 213. That was a lot. Yeah, Kim, are you ready to take it away?
I sure am.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to learn from Kim. So thanks, Kim.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Jill. Let me go ahead and make sure I'm sharing sound. And hang on, I got to do this. And then the controls are always in the way there. Okay, so yeah, I want to start by thanking Jill. She's the one who got this all together. As she mentioned, I'm originally from New York. I'm from Long Island, about 50 minutes to the east of where most of you are. And it's curious, here in Illinois, in Chicago in particular, a lot of the like cool educational things usually start in New York or in California, and then Illinois is third. That's often how a lot of things work. And so it is just an honor to be working with New York City to now be getting your heritage speaker work. You've all been doing heritage speaker work for some time, right? Excellent work. But as we're going to see in just a moment, so many people here in the country have just been doing it sort of by the seat of their pants and with really good intentions, et cetera, as best they can. And now it's becoming more and more common to find programs like this one. So I really want to thank Jill. You probably already know how fortunate you all are to have her in this position, bringing this PD in for you. So I'm honored to be working with you for 2 sessions, and then Nancy Dominguez, who actually got her PhD with us at the University of Illinois Chicago. She's from here in Chicago. I first met her when she was an undergraduate in my course on Spanish in the United States. And now she is taking all of her experiences, both personal and professional, and we'll be sharing those with you too. So Jill talked a little bit about me. I did direct our Heritage Speaker program at the University of Illinois Chicago for 18 years. It was already large when I got there, and then it just kept on growing. And we became a Hispanic serving institution, et cetera. We've got a million sections. It's a wonderful challenge. I've also teachers like you about Spanish for Heritage Speaker issues, but I consider myself a student of you, right? I am not a high school teacher. I've never been a high school teacher. And my time in high school was a long time ago. Now I visit high schools all the time, but you all are the experts on what it is to be high school teachers, right? So I always consider myself a student of people who participate in these kinds of things with me. So this is a collaboration, and I look forward to learning and sharing with you. I do offer, Jill, here's a shameless plug. Sorry, I slipped this in. I've got a shameless plug about an online course that we do offer every single fall. So if you want to learn more about teaching Spanish to heritage speakers, you are more than welcome to join that course. But then finally, as Jill mentioned, I have been doing research on Spanish in the US. I've got a book, just came out about Spanish in Chicago. I don't want to tell you how long ago I started that, but we published it. It came out in October. I've got this book, El Español de los Estados Unidos. This is the book that Jill mentioned, Cultivando Jardines. And my work with you all here also helps me write this book for other teachers. So I really appreciate our collaboration so much, so that I can share this with other teachers. Chicago's a little different from New York, as you can see. So even though I'm from New York, and I recall like how diverse it is. In fact, I was just there this past weekend. I gave a talk at the New York State Speech and Hearing Conference up in White Plains. But you all are way more diverse than we are. But that being said, we have a lot of things in common when it comes to working with our heritage speakers. Oh, finally, I was on the AP Spanish Language and Culture content exam. So that means I helped write the questions for 3 years. That's a 3-year appointment. Also, anybody here, have you been to be what they call a reader? They call it reading, but we could also just call it grading. Has anybody been a reader for the AP language exam? Okay, so I've done that a bunch of times out in Cincinnati, where you go for a week and you sit there and you basically grade AP exams and do nothing else for a week. So I bring some of that experience to bear too. And I know we have some experts here on AP things, so I look forward to collaborating with you. All right, so, and just to point out, I know some of us don't speak Spanish. A lot of my examples are obviously going to be in Spanish. So hopefully we can find a way to make the communication clear. I do try to use inclusive language where I can. Okay, sometimes I use, let's see what I say here. When the government uses the term Hispanic, I will use that term. I know a lot of people don't like it. So maybe I'll use Latino, Latinx, Latine. I also alternate. Sometimes I'll use what the RAE says we're supposed to use, right? The masculino genérico, todos los alumnos son buenos. Sometimes I'll use the femenino genérico. Why not? Todas las alumnas son buenas y que los hombres sepan que están ahí incluidos, right? Sometimes I use dobletes, usos mixtos, right? I find those a little bit cumbersome. Sometimes I'm using this E. It looks like I think the E is going to win, right, over the X. I hear todos los alumnos all the time. I don't know about y'all, but I hear this all the time. I don't know what the crystal ball says will win, and what are the nietos of our nietos, how they will be speaking. I don't know, or nietas or nietes, how they will be speaking. But I just want to sort of make this statement to show inclusivity for all folks, whether they be non-binary or things like that. Okay. Is that okay with everybody? And if that works, then I'll go ahead and jump in. I was reading your Jamboard, and a lot of you are talking about the influx of Venezolanos as, and we have a ton of them as well here in Chicago. So just sort of refreshes, I think, what we're doing in lots of interesting ways. I think you're all here because you know what a heritage speaker is. Okay, this is somebody who's raised in a home in the United States where a non-English language is spoken. Okay. So basically here in the United States, we have heritage speakers of Spanish, French, Tagalog, Polish. I mean, you name it, we got it, right? Of course, here, most of us are focusing on Spanish. The thing here is that the proficiency in Spanish can really vary. Okay. Some people only understand it. Okay. And we used to call that receptive passive bilingualism. We used to call it passive bilingualism, but there's really nothing passive, right, about your brain when it's understanding stuff. So we now start using the term receptive bilingual, okay? Whereas other folks have more productive capacities in it, okay? Now, you probably already know that Latinas form, actually it's 19%. It went up 1% since I last showed this slide. 19% of our population, and they are predicting that by 2050, it's going to be 25%. 1 out of 4 people, 1 out of 4 in this country, they say, will be Latino by 2050. But guess what? We're already there. We're already there with our youth. 1 out of 4 youth in this country are already of Latino origin. And I don't have to tell you, you're in New York City, okay? You live in an area where many of your schools are 50 to 100% Latino. That means you are a majority Latino school. Can you please hit your little, what do we call these things? Your reaction. Either give me a thumbs up or an applause or something if your school is 50 to 100% Latino students. Okay, I see a heart there. Ariane has an applause there. Okay, wonderful. I'm trying to see who else is doing it. Araceli put a heart. That's nice. Okay. Luisa. Okay, I'm imagining it's quite a few of you. I see some of you are like, wait, how do I do the thing? Luisa, Monica. Okay, wonderful. That's not surprising because 1/3 of all New York City schools are majority Latino schools. And I was kind of surprised when I learned Chicago's the same way. 1/3 of our schools are majority Latino schools. Half of schools in Miami are majority Latino. Los Angeles, ni se diga. It's hard to find a school that's not majority Latino schools. This map never surprises anybody, right? If you ask people, hey, where are there a lot of Latino people? They'll say, oh, the Southwest, and they'll say Southern Florida, and they'll say New York City. Actually, does this surprise you? I take it back. This might surprise some people, right? Some folks don't know that there are towns up in Oregon that are like 80% Mexicanos, you know, and not just Mexicanos, they're from Oaxaca, which is the city where I go every summer, and I bring Latino study abroad college students. But anyway, in general, I think you would agree, this map, where the darker the color, the greater the concentration of Latino students, it really doesn't surprise anybody. This next map is what tends to surprise people. This next map is going to show the growth, the percent change between 2010 and 2020. Look at that. Where is the growth happening? It's not happening in all those areas where people are used to thinking about it. It's happening here in our Eastern Seaboard. It's happening here in the Midwest. Okay. This is fascinating. I did zoom in on New York City. You all still had between a 25 to 50% growth, okay, in the Latino population, which is tremendous. I'm from right here, exit 52. We've also had extraordinary growth. So what's the conclusion? There is a probability that no matter where you are in the United States, you're gonna have some heritage Spanish speakers in your classroom. But here's the sad truth. Most of us, when we went to college and we said, I'm going to be a Spanish teacher, okay? Most of our classwork was only about L2, second language teaching. Now, the good news is that this is changing, okay? We are now seeing more and more pre-service, university teacher programs that offer this kind of thing. So my university is an example, right? We have a class. You're going to be a Spanish teacher? You got to take this class on teaching heritage speakers, okay? Some people might not think it's all that different. Spanish teacher's a Spanish teacher, right? Well, I hope if you're not already convinced that you will be by the end of this talk, that it is different. It is very different. And it requires a different set of skills and a different sort of knowledge base, okay? So yeah, heritage speakers are coming to a classroom. I don't care where you are, right? I remember I once got invited to North Carolina. They were like, we don't have to listen to this. We don't need to know about heritage speakers. And then guess what? About 5 years later, I read in the news a report about a kindergarten classroom, okay? 25 Mexicanitos in that kindergarten classroom, and not a teacher in the district knew any Spanish, right? So this is happening all over the place. Okay, now, what makes them different? I hope you would agree that heritage speakers are different from second language learners. Sometimes it takes a little help to convince other people. So I know pretty much everything I'm going to present to you now, you've already thought about, but sometimes when we clarify it in this way, it helps us to convince, principals or colleagues who maybe don't think that they have to be separated in these beginning classes. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 ways that heritage speakers are different from second language learners. So what I like to say is that heritage speakers are like apples, okay? And second language learners are like orange, okay? I guess I'm saying that all of our students are fruity, but they're different kinds of fruit, okay? And we're going to talk about linguistic, affective, and academic differences. Let's start with the linguistic differences. There are actually books and books and books. In fact, I have a couple books here that only talk about the linguistic differences between heritage speakers and second language learners, okay? But we're gonna do it in like 2 slides, okay? So it's necessarily gonna be a little bit reduced, but hopefully it'll be useful for you, okay? So let's say that, let's see, Luisa here. Let's say Luisa says to me, hey, Kim, I've got 2 students here. One's a heritage speaker, one's a second language learner. And they took a proficiency test, okay? They took I don't care which one, maybe the DELE, maybe the Apple. They took a test of Spanish proficiency and they got the same score. I would say to Luisa, do you think that they have the same proficiency really, even though they got the same score on that test? And I'm sorry, Luisa, you got called out because you're on my screen right now. Would you agree that because they got the same score on that test, that necessarily means they have the same Spanish proficiency? Luisa saying no. And I agree. I agree with you, Luisa. We could say that their path, the way that they got to that acquisition is different. Okay, now here's what I want you to do. You ready? Get your fingers ready. I want you to type into the chat box whether you think it's heritage speakers, you could put HS, or whether you think it's L2 learners, our second language learners, L2. And Jill, if you could please just tell me the first 3 or 4 things that people type, okay? What I want to know is the following. We're talking about linguistic differences between a heritage speaker and a second language learner. Ready? Which of the 2 groups always, as they're learning Spanish or Chinese or whatever the heritage language is, they are learning some grammatical terminology. They know what a pretérito and an imperfecto and a subjuntivo and a pluscuamperfecto no sé cuánto. They know the terminology. Do you think it's heritage speakers or
Oh,
L2 learners?
Everyone is right. It's L2. We started with
Everyone's writing L2.
Yay.
Excellent. And that is the answer. This doesn't mean that heritage speakers never know grammatical terminology, but you know what? It's pretty rare. The reason why it's pretty rare is, where do you learn grammatical terminology? In home or at school? You learn it at school. Where did heritage speakers learn their Spanish? We just saw the definition. They learned it at home. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when my kids were little and I'd be brushing their teeth, I wouldn't be like, Nicolás, el participio pasado del verbo comer es comido. Like, I just didn't do that, right? So most heritage speakers grew up naturalistically learning a language. They didn't learn that terminology. So when I see sometimes teachers get frustrated because they'll say, I told them to fill in the blank with the pretérito, but they use the imperfecto, right? They use what comes naturally to them. They don't know. Does this make sense? They don't know what's called a pretérito or an imperfecto. So we shouldn't assume that they're going to have grammatical terminology. Okay, great. Next question. Which of the 2, and this is a little more complex, which of the 2 groups is going to learn a variety of Spanish that is almost always going to be a prestigious variety, and it's almost always going to be a monolingual variety? I'll come back to what I mean by that in just a moment. But which of the 2 groups do you think it is? Type in your answer. Do you think it's heritage or L2?
We have a lot of L2s.
Yes.
Yep.
Now, this doesn't mean that our heritage speakers never speak a prestigious monolingual variety. What I am trying to get across here is that many times our heritage speakers speak a variety of Spanish that is stigmatized, okay? And we're going to see in a moment why their variety of Spanish is stigmatized, okay? It's stigmatized for at least 2 different reasons, and we're going to come back to that in a moment. Okay, great. Next, which of the 2 groups is almost always exposed to literacy in Spanish? Is it heritage or is it L2? Jill, what are our first 3 or 4 answers?
L2.
Exactly. This doesn't mean that heritage speakers never have read a book in Spanish before, okay? But I'm going to show you some data in a moment that talks about the typical levels of having been read to in Spanish as children, okay? Plus the fact that heritage speakers, where were they educated? Most of their education here in the United States. And most of education here in the United States takes place in English, right? Even if you're in a dual language program, English very typically is what predominates. Okay, now, have you heard of this term called the critical period? I'm assuming a lot of you have. Some of you are nodding your heads, okay. And so you probably know why I have it in quotes, right? Kaylin, you were nodding your head that you've heard it before. Do you maybe, and I'm putting you on the spot, do you have a sense maybe, what is your definition of, or what have you heard that the critical period is?
I guess the exact range kind of escapes me, but typically, like, people say that the earlier you learn a language, the better. So that critical period would
nailed
be
it.
early on. Yeah.
You nailed it. That is it. The earlier, the better. So why do I have this in quotes? Because people who study linguistics from a psycholinguistic perspective, they get a little picky about this. And if I get up and say the earlier, the better, they throw tomatoes at me. And they say, no, because blah, blah, and they like to qualify. And they're not wrong. Okay. But I think for our purposes, it's also not wrong to say what Kaylin just said, the earlier, the better. Okay. There's no magic birthday. Is there? Yuli, do you think there's some magic birthday? Once you turn 9, that's it. You can't acquire languages anymore. I mean, we know that's not true, right? But what we know is that around 8, 9, 10-ish, okay, around 8, 9, 10-ish, okay, if you move to another country, for example, and start learning another language, after that point, it is very unlikely, okay, it's not impossible, it's very unlikely that you're going to acquire that language and sort of pass for, right, someone who is raised there. You're not going to convert. Here's the fancy phrase, ready? You're not going to converge on the exact phonological and morphosyntactic system of the people who were raised there. Okay, so having said all that, in the United States, which of the two groups starts learning Spanish well after the critical period went bye-bye? Is it heritage speakers or is it L2 learners? And Jill, can you tell us what answers we're getting there?
L2.
Absolutely, because by definition, when are heritage speakers starting to learn their language? A ver, let's see, Raquel or Juan or Alexa, maybe you can unmute and tell us real quick. When do heritage speakers start learning Spanish?
Our native Spanish speakers? Language,
Well, our heritage speakers.
Our
When do
heritage-
heritage speakers?
the moment they get an opportunity or they're exposed to it at home.
That's right. Pretty much from birth, right?
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Some people, some people say that in utero, kids are exposed to tones of language. So who knows? Anyway, the point here is that our second language learners in this country, the vast majority start learning Spanish when they are freshmen in high school. And how old are you when you are a freshman in high school? What is that, 14-ish?
14. Yep.
Yeah. Is that a good time to start, you think? That's a conversation for another time. You know, we, as you know, Kaylin pointed out before, you know, earlier is better, but that's fine. What we see here is that our L2 learners start after the critical period. All right, so if we're moving on, who typically tends to possess more fluent oral abilities, their production, their comprehension? Who do you think it is? Type it in real quick, heritage or L2? What are we getting here, Jill?
Heritage learners.
Who has a large vocabulary typically, especially for everyday items and processes?
Heritage for the win.
Yep, for the win. This one is variable, but if a student comes up to me and says, disculpe, no sé usted tenga el tiempo, and they talk to me in usted, who is that probably going to be? Again, this does vary. I find that it's the heritage speakers. They have this sociolinguistic accuracy, particularly Mexicanos. They have that quite a bit. And what about that pronunciation? Who converges more on a native-like system?
Heritage.
I hope they're
Yeah,
all
great.
typing heritage. Great.
They
Thank
are.
you, Jill. Okay. Wonderful. So, you know, if you weren't already convinced, I hope you are now, that heritage speakers are very different from second language learners. So what I like to think about is when I mentioned the Cultivando Jardines, right? That's the title of the new book coming out. When we are teaching Spanish as a new language, okay, we are like tilling the soil, planting that seed, right? Covering it back up. There was nothing there. Okay. And then we got to get the sun and the water. And like you would think I'm some kind of gardener or something, but you know, I think this metaphor makes sense. Okay. That's what we're doing. Okay. And I think it merits mentioning here something really important. What I'm about to say rocked my world when I was in grad school. This might be the most important thing I learned. And it goes like this. You ready? Nobody can teach a language to anybody else. Y eso me movió el tapete completamente. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a Spanish teacher. What do you mean I can't teach a language to anybody else? No, no, no. Nobody can teach a language to anybody else. Okay. What we do is we create the conditions under which the language can develop. I'll say it again. The most we can do as teachers is create the conditions under which our students can grow, right? Acquire the language, right? So, like when you plant a seed, do you grow the plant? In English, we say, I grew the plant, pero tú creces la planta, tú haces crecer. Like you don't, does this make sense? The plant is not a direct object. We don't grow it. It grows. If we did our job well, if we tilled the soil, and I don't know, we put fertilizer in the soil and we watered it and we gave it sun, right? Okay. So our second language learners come to us, they got nothing. We got to till the soil, plant the seed, right? Put it in the nursery, take good care of it, stuff like that, right? Our heritage speakers, on the other hand, they come to us with something already planted. They've already got some roots. Sometimes the roots aren't even coming up above the ground, but there's something there. Does this make sense? This is the important distinction here, okay? Now, here's something I stole from the internet. And, it doesn't mean to offend anybody. It's just poking a little bit of fun here. Would you agree that second language students, their strengths tend to be more in their comprehension, and then, right, it kind of declines with their speaking? Would you tend to agree with that? Yeah, I'm seeing some heads nod. Okay. I know this is true for me in French. Okay. You can put me in a university classroom and I will understand most of what's going on if it's in the liberal arts. Okay. But when you ask me to talk about it, I'm going to sound like I'm, in kindergarten. Okay. Now, what do you think is true for the heritage speakers? I don't know if maybe Coral or Elena want to answer. What do you think is true for the heritage speakers with their horse? I guess this is a horse, right? ¿Qué piensan ustedes? Judy, Ariane, Tammy, ¿qué piensan? Carla?
I'm sorry, Araceli, I think it's the same way. They listen, they comprehend, they can participate, but when it gets also to writing and when it gets to speak, they kind of shy and they don't want to share one because they don't want, I teach high school, sometimes they don't want to participate because the way they pronounce or the way they speak, they're shy. I'm in high school, so.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We do see that sort of, what could we call that? Performance anxiety, right? That's definitely true. But I think what this meme, I think, was kind of going for is like, where are their strengths? Okay. So the second language students have sort of strength with comprehension and knowing this is a pretérito, is an imperfecto, that kind of stuff. Whereas our heritage speakers are kind of the other way around, right? That's where I think this meme was going for. Okay. As far as like formality. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say in the chat, which you probably can't see, they're noticing it's probably
No,
reversed.
I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jill. Thank you.
Speaking,
No, I can't.
then comprehension, then writing. Yep.
Right. That's it. It's just the opposite, right? And like I said, I know this is true for me with my second language with French. Okay. Now I promised you I was going to come back to this point. I said second language learners learn a variety of Spanish or of the heritage language. Okay. That is prestigious and that is monolingual. What do I mean by this? Well, as far as I know, I've never heard of a Western, developed post-capitalist, whatever we are, postmodern society, okay, where you don't have your haves and your have-nots. Like, unfortunately, I don't know, humans are that's just how we are, right? That's where we are in our evolution. We've got people who've got stuff, people who don't have stuff. We've got people who have prestige, and we've got people who don't have prestige. That's just what we do, all right? And in these societies, which again, there are probably exceptions, but I don't know. What we tend to do is the people who have prestige, okay, we tend to think that the way they do things is somehow better, right? So if you are wealthier, if you're in the upper class, if you live on the, Upper West Side, if you went to college, and if you are ethno-racially prestigious, that's something else we do, right? We discriminate and have ideas based on ethno-racial groupings. Okay. So if you are white, let's just be honest. Okay. That is who has prestige in this country and many others. Okay. What we do then is we say, well, the ways that those people speak is better. Okay. We've all been sort of brainwashed into thinking this, and I'll come back to this a little more. I think that's one of my main points here. Okay. And on the other, another facet to this is that if the way that you speak doesn't show signs of contact with another language, we tend to think that that's better too. Now, this is really weird to me because did you know we've got 8 billion, that's with a B, 8 billion people running around on this planet. It's a little over 8 billion right now. That's our human population right now, 8 billion. Do you know what percent of that 8 billion is actually multilingual? They speak 2 or more languages. You know what? Take a guess. Type in the chat. What percent of human beings on this planet do you think are bilingual or multilingual? They speak 2 or more languages. Jill, can you read out the first couple percentages that people are typing?
Yep. Thinking time. 25% says Juan. 70% says Arlene. 75% Coral. 75 Monica. 50% Judy.
Okay,
85,
thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, you live in New York City. That's I live in Chicago. You know, I leave my house, I walk to Walgreens, I hear 3 languages, right? So we think, right? We see this bilingualism. The answer is we don't know. We don't know a ciencia cierta, but linguists who study this estimate that it's about 60. That's more than half, isn't it? That's the majority of the 8 billion people on this planet are bilingual or multilingual. Sin embargo, what happens is those who are monolingual, okay, have this idea that no, you have to just speak it just this in a monolingual way. If you mix it with something else, if you let it be influenced by something else, if you know, it's got to be pure all by itself. And if you let anything contaminate it, it's not as good. Okay. And I find that curious, given that 60% of the planet actually is bilingual and speaks more than one language. And we'll come back to this later. But anyway, what I hope to have showed here is that in our societies, and I don't care where you go, you know, modern countries, you've got people with prestige and you've got people without prestige. And what we tend to do is think that the ways of speaking of the prestigious people are worth more. So African-American English, you don't have to go very far to hear somebody say, oh, that's bad English. That's just ungrammatical. That's just terrible English, right? And the way, I guess you'd say that I'm speaking, which people call, I guess, mainstream US English, is somehow better. Well, guess what? It's no better, it's no worse. They're just different systems. But since certain people are discriminated against, their ways of speaking are discriminated against, okay? And so the flip side of this coin, of course, is that the way that you speak is very likely going to be stigmatized if your social group is stigmatized. It's just así de fácil, así de claro, okay? Working class folks, people from rural areas, people who, you know, have lower levels of formal education, people who are ethno-racially stigmatized against, people say, ooh, the way they speak isn't as good, right? They make these value judgments, okay? Also, if they show signs of contact with another language, people go, oh no, the Spanish that que hablan los indígenas en Perú en contacto con el quechua, it is not as good as el español que hablan en Lima, los que descendieron de los españoles, right? I mean, this is pretty clear what's going on here, right? Okay. And so what tends to happen is our second language learners, we said, are exposed to what we have put in the textbooks, what we think is more prestigious, right? And so as they're learning, naturally they make errors. So we have here a second language learner. Her name is Haley. Now, you know, I'm not trying to offend anybody named Haley. My niece is named Haley. She gave me permission to use her name. No Haleys were harmed in the making of this presentation, okay? But, you know, when Haley says something like, me llamo es Haley, teachers respond, as they should, by saying, well, yeah, good, Haley, you go, girl. You're getting there. You're learning Spanish. I'm going to help you eventually, right? We don't tell Haley no and like make her feel bad, don't we? Okay. But then what happens when we have a heritage speaker who uses a variety, or I should say a variant, right, that is stigmatized? Again, it could be stigmatized because it was stigmatized back in their parents' countries of origin. It could be stigmatized because, like this example here, te llamo para atrás. How many of y'all have heard that? Everybody here has heard te llamo para atrás. First time I heard it a million years ago, I thought it meant like, hey, te estoy llamando, and I'm doing it para atrás, like this. Like, I didn't realize that that's how you say to call back in United States Spanish. And now look at what this teacher's doing. This teacher's like, ugh, ¿cómo que te llamo para atrás? Eso no se dice, eso no es correcto. All right, and this is problematic. And I found a really funny TikTok that I want to share with you about this. But before I show it to you, can you please either unmute yourself and shout it out or type it in the chat? ¿Qué palabras usan ustedes to refer to this kind of grass, you know, when you have to cut the grass? ¿Qué palabras usan ustedes?
La grama.
Hierba.
La grama. Those are my boricuas who talk about
La
the grama.
grama, la hierba.
La
La
hierba.
hierba. ¿Qué más?
Grama, césped.
El césped, ¿qué más?
Pasto.
Zacate.
Pasto. Ajá, bien. Ok, entonces vamos a ver qué pasa en este salón de clase. El hablante de herencia es de origen mexicano. Vamos a ver qué pasa. Somebody just give me a quick thumbs up to let me know that you can hear it, please, when I start. Okay, ready?
Héctor, ¿cómo se dice grass en español?
Fácil, profe. Se dice zacate.
Incorrecto. Dariana, what about you?
Oh, señora, that's a super easy one. Se dice césped with a tilde on the first E.
Correcto.
¿Qué?
All right, so what happened here? We had the teacher tell Héctor, the hablante de herencia, que zacate era incorrecto.
I say
Right?
zacate.
Good. Are you offended? I hope you're mad.
Yes.
Good. Well, actually, we're not mad. We're glad that this lady made this TikTok, right? I suspect que ella hizo este TikTok porque esto le pasó a ella. And I want to tell you something. I've been teaching at my university for 24 years. I've had 24 years of students tell me que sus maestras de high school bullied them in these ways. Okay? Now, I know nobody in this room does that, but it happens, and it's been happening for a long time. And this is one of the things that our heritage speaker classes should be not doing. Okay? We want to talk about, you know, sociolinguistic justice. Okay? So again, we have varieties of language can be stigmatized for these reasons, right? Have you ever heard nadie, truje, asina, be that? This is a lot more in the Southwest. Fuistes, have you heard tú fuistes? Instead of tú fuiste? And here's everybody's favorite, aiga. Instead, oh, I see you laughing. I see you laughing, Ariana. Yep, that's everybody's favorite. Oh, aiga. Somebody somewhere just fainted right now because I put aiga on my slide. Okay? If you want to get a high school, prescriptivist high school teacher to faint and get their blood pressure up, go ahead and talk about aiga and tú fuistes and things like that, right? These particular variants are stigmatized for these reasons, okay, for the socioeconomic reasons that we mentioned earlier. And our students come with these varieties. Why? Because their parents did. Because their parents are not among the wealthy, educated classes of la República Dominicana, or Puerto Rico, Mexico, or Venezuela, de donde vengan. Okay? So they bring these varieties. And again, these are not incorrect. Notice it doesn't say correct, incorrect up here. What does it say? Prestigious and stigmatized, right? So that's one reason why language variants can experience stigma. Another reason is what we talked about earlier. If it's a contact variety. So if somebody says felonía for felony, if somebody says aplicar para un trabajo, if somebody says llamar para atrás. So do you see, our students often have both of these going on. Not only do they bring something from Latin America, which was stigmatized down there, then you add on top of it the fact that it's also in contact with English. So it's like doubly stigmatized. Does this make sense? Okay, I think I saw a hand earlier. Jill, was that you?
Yes, I was just looking at the chat and Arlene kind of mentioned how that teacher did not accept the vernacular. And I think about a lot of you may know Maria Quintanilla and just talking about how this is authentic language, right? Anything the student says is authentic, it's real. It may not be the form you're used to, but it is authentic. Yeah.
That's right. That's
and
right.
it's their identity too, right? So they should never be told, language is so connected to identity.
It sure is. If toda la comunidad lo dice, we cannot call it incorrect, but we are going to come back in a moment to see issues of formality. This doesn't mean that we say what we want, when we want, where we want, how we want. This doesn't mean anything goes. Okay. But we're going to come back to what the sort of, what I propose anyway, as far as what we could and should do as language teachers. I wonder if maybe we'll take one more question now, but then we're going to try to leave them all for the period at the end. But Raquel, did you have something to add?
I actually had a personal experience. I remember when I was in high school, my Spanish teacher was from Spain, and my participation was 0 because she wanted to value my language versus hers. And then when I was a junior in high school, I had a Dominican teacher, and my participation was 100% because she would encourage us to say, well, how do you say it in your country? And that was such an empowering statement for a kid to hear, well, how do you say it in your country?
How do you say
And
it?
you bring that to the classroom because the kids will tell you that's the reason they're reluctant to speak, because they've always been corrected. Así no se dice. You almost want a t-shirt that says así no se dice, because that's what they're taught.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because that's exactly, and thank you for not doing what your teacher, did to you, that first teacher anyway, right? Oh, hang on, I got a cramp in my leg. I don't know why that happened. Hang on a second, let me get this out of here. All right, so we're gonna move on here, and we'll come back to some of these examples later. That was just some of the linguistic reasons why, ways in which the apples are different from the oranges. Right now, let's move into some of the affective, and this makes a good transition. Thank you, Raquel. You gave us a perfect transition. Affective, of course, means emotions, right? Our students have a family connection to the language, right? So if we tell a student, like Raquel got told, así no se dice, I mean, what? They're going to go home and tell their abuelita, abuelita, no se dice sacate, right? Like they're going to go home and tell their whole family that their Spanish is bad or something. I mean, when you tell little Miss Haley, no se dice me llamo es Haley, she goes, oh, okay, right? Correction is something that exists for second language learners. There's nothing to correct. There's nothing to correct if the heritage speaker says it and their whole community says it. Okay, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Frequently, they are very aware of their limitations in Spanish. Now, when I say this, I always get one teacher who says, no, pero yo tuve un muchacho que llegó y él pensaba que lo sabía todo y blah, blah, blah. Yes, that happens. But at least in my experience, that is the minority. Most of the students come in con la cola entre las patas and they're like, mi español es malo. Mi español es malo. Okay, and we're going to come back to this in a moment. They experience what I call a triple bullying. What do I mean by that? Our heritage speakers, just like our friend here in the TikTok, they get bullied, and there could be more. I'm just going to identify 3 ways that they get bullied. Number 1, they get bullied by Anglophone society. Did you know that 80%, 80, my friends, 80% of this country only speaks English? I know that's shocking to you. You live in New York City. There are 10 languages spoken on the floor of your building. I get it. But the rest of the country is not like that. And a lot of them are very discriminatory. You don't have to look very far to find cases of, you're in America, speak English. In fact, this might have happened to some of you. Okay, you're out in public, you're speaking a language other than English, and you get that stink eye. You know what I'm talking about. Or somebody says something to you. Now, if you're like me and you're white or you pass for white, you probably get it less than our friends of color. Okay, I have friends of color who get this a lot more. Okay, people feel un poco, menos bravos para decírmelo a mí, right? Than to people of color. So there's a racial element here as well. Okay, so our students, number 1, bullied by Anglophone society. Number 2, they're bullied by teachers. Nobody in this room, of course, but I'm telling you, 24 years at my university, I have plenty of evidence how much bullying is happening, just like this teacher that we saw in the TikTok. Okay, and I hate to tell you this, La Real Academia, they participate in the bullying. Okay, the ANLE, Academia Norteamericana de la Lengua Española, publishes this nasty little book. Don't buy this book, okay? It's 80 pages of no se dice, no se dice, no se dice. If you want to see it for yourself, ask me, I'll send you a PDF. I don't care. Violating copyright laws. I don't want you to spend any money on this, okay? It's terrible, okay? This lady here, I got nothing against this lady, but I don't know if you've ever seen this. I can't remember if it's Me Too or Pero Like. 10 words you've been saying wrong. Y el muchacho dominicano aquí just accepts it all. He's like, yeah, los dominicanos hablaban mal. And we're going to get this lady to tell us how to speak correctly. No. And if you go on YouTube and you see this, you'll see my comment buried in there about what I said to this lady, like, hey, you know, if una comunidad entera lo dice, se dice. They're not saying it wrong. Knock it off with the bullying. Finally, and this is the saddest part, in my opinion, it is their own family members. You've probably heard of this no sabo kids trend. Okay. This lady here thinks it's really cute to talk about her kid as a no sabo kid. And I'm like, lady, you know, first of all, I would never wag my finger at her and say, pero tú no le enseñaste español. I would never do that, because we all know that speaking a language, transmitting a language to children, it's a personal choice and it's a challenge. I would never, ever shame anybody for transmitting or not transmitting a language to their children. Where I am going to say, alto ahí, is that you can't then make fun of the kid for not knowing Spanish. Because let me ask you something. Would you say to a plant, hey, plant, you didn't grow very tall. That's your fault. Or would you be like, plant didn't control the amount of light and sun and water that it got, right? The kid did not control the amount of Spanish input that he got. A kid, nobody controls the languages that they learn as a child. No one, right? So when this lady is shaming her son for not knowing Spanish, and she's not the only one. His tios, his primos, everybody shames this kid, all right? So our students are growing up in this environment. Some of you may have too, where mainstream society is telling you, ay, el español, no habla. Well, actually, they wouldn't say it in Spanish. They'd say, no, we don't want Spanish here. You're in America, speak English. Then you're like, dang, okay, I'll, you know. Then you get to your Spanish class and they tell you, no, your Spanish stinks, right? And then you go home to your family and they say, boy, your Spanish really stinks. It's like these kids can't win. Do you see? It's a triple bullying, okay? So they've got this linguistic self-esteem por el suelo, right? But little Miss Haley's like, yo, hablo español. Like she doesn't feel that way. She gets patted on her little white head every time she says anything. Do you see? This is a problem. This is a big problem that we have. And then finally, I'm moving into some of the academic reasons. Okay, we know that our students tend to come here with lower levels of formal education. I promised you I was going to come back to this point here. We know that when people read to their children, the children end up having higher literacy levels as adults. Now, please understand, when I show you this data, I am not doing it to shame any parents. I'm not saying, look at these parents who don't read to their, that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is showing you the facts. I am showing you that some families don't sit and read to their kids at night the way these white middle-class families do, all right? And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you're working 16 hours a day, okay, if you yourself don't have strong levels of literacy, if books are expensive, if in your household that just wasn't a thing that you did, that's what's going to happen. And why do I bring this up? I think it's important because I've seen some high school teachers who say to me, no, ¿sabes qué? Estos muchachos hablan muy bien. I'm just going to put them over here to read. A ver qué les doy. Okay, let me give them some Borges to read. I'm like, Borges? Are you kidding me? You know, you got to think about the kids' experience with literacy in the past. I think you better start with people in Espanol. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to meet the students at their level. And I'm going to give you a really, really excellent, fantastic, marvelous article to read. Hopefully you'll have a chance to read it before we meet again, about exactly this point, about how do we get our heritage speakers to become lifelong readers. So anyway, we have this fact here. We also know that poverty has devastating effects on our kids' learning, okay? It's very hard for our students to pay attention when they're dealing with a lot of these issues, okay? Now, why do I keep bringing this up? Because I think it's important, right? The way that bilingualism is valued in our society. We said that 60% of the planet is bilingual, and that's wonderful. And please don't get me wrong. I am so happy que esta nena hable dos lenguas. Well, she's actually 9 now, but remember when she was 2? Did you see this? Princess Charlotte was 2, and everybody's like, ooh, because she's learning French. And I'm glad. That's great. I'm so glad that she's bilingual. But I love this response too, right? Most children of immigrants are bilingual also. But why aren't we hearing about that in the Daily Mirror, right? Do you see the way that we value second languages versus heritage languages? Anyway, our high school dropout rates are absolutely atrocious. In fact, does anybody know? You can type it in the chat or say it out loud. There's a word that people now use because people refuse to use the word dropout. They think that dropout is like, oh, I dropped out. It's voluntary. I just decided to because I don't want to go to school anymore, right? There's another word that people are using instead of dropout. Does anybody know what it is? Jill, are we getting anything in the chat? No? Okay. The word that I'm hearing is push out. Okay. When you're seeing, you know, these rates of people of our youth of color leaving school, right? That there's something systematic going on. You can't tell me that they're less smart. You can't tell me that their parents are less interested, right? That there's something going on. People say, oh, the system's broken. And others say, no, it's not broken. It's working exactly the way it was designed to work. Okay. To keep people in certain social classes in those social classes. Okay. This is all very depressing. Let me give you a little rayito de sol. Okay, y'all, we can make a difference. There's at least 4 studies now that show that a high quality heritage Spanish speaker program can help. It can help with this. It can give students that oh, it was phrased so beautiful before, the way, you know, Raquel said it, that identity, that sense of, you know, I belong, I'm important, right? The things I say matter. It can contribute to graduation, right? And it can contribute to getting them into college. But you know what? It's not enough to get them enrolled in college. You got to get them to graduate from college too. And a good quality heritage speaker program can do that. And we will talk about some of the ways that that can happen. Okay. So I hope to have convinced you, if you weren't already, that heritage speakers are very different from second language learners. But guess what? They are also very different from each other, right? There's lots of different kinds of apples. Do you have a favorite kind of apple? Do you have a kind of apple that you hate? Do you know the name of any kind of apple at all? On the count of 3, unmute yourself and say a kind of apple. 1, 2, 3.
Fuji. Honeycrisp.
Green.
Rcoon.
Gala.
Excellent. There are so many different kinds of apples. Who said Honeycrisp? That's my favorite too. We are apple hermanas. Okay, so we have lots of different kinds of apples. And also, if we go back to that plant metaphor I talked about earlier, our students show up. Remember, we said they already had something ya sembrado, que empezó a crecer. Some of our students look like this. Some of our students look like this. Some of our students are here. And I've broken it down into 9. And it can get hard to discriminate between a 6 and a 7 or a 3 and a 4. But in general, I like to think about our students' Spanish development as according to one of these levels. So I'd like to very quickly show you some of the reasons why. Why do some students' Spanish look like this? And you could have a brother whose Spanish looks like this, same household. Okay? And their Spanish looks very, very different. Okay? Okay, now some of our students are born in the US, some are born abroad. Right now it's at about 60-40. Okay? However, if you're born abroad, that doesn't tell me if you came here when you were 6 months old or 6 years old. Okay? And there's going to be really big differences for your Spanish. Did you study when you were back in, you know, Venezuela or Guatemala or El Salvador, right? Or were you a SIFE? And this is the acronym some of you already know, for a student with interrupted formal education, right? I just came across one in a study. They had to look at pictures of stuff, and one of the pictures was a stapler. She didn't know what it was. She had never seen one because she had never been to school, okay? So that's going to have a big difference in their Spanish. Maybe some of your students attended a dual language school, right? Half the day or more in Spanish. It's a little rare, but it can happen. Maybe you had your abuela in the house. We call this abuela factor. That's very important to have abuela. Maybe you were firstborn and maybe you were later born. Why might it be? Many, many studies have showed this. Kids 1 and 2 tend to have stronger Spanish than kids 3 and beyond. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Kid 1, right? If kid 1's parents arrived from Venezuela when they were adults, okay? Kid 1 is born in the Bronx, maybe. Kid 1 is being raised in a household that is what? Monolingual in Spanish. That kid goes to school 5 years old. They don't know a whole lot of English, okay? That kid learns English, comes home. Now kid 3 is born, all right? Do you see how kid 3 is not really being raised in the same linguistic household? Does this make sense? Kid 3 is not raised in a monolingual Spanish household. Kid 3 is raised in a household where kids 1 and 2 are coming home with the Spanish, okay? So that's why it's very, very, very different. So Now we have 5 examples here. We have somebody like Marta. Okay, I'm not going to read these because I'm going to send you to a document where you're going to get to read about these 3 kids. We have Luis, who's Boricua. We have Roberto, llegó de Argentina a los 10 años. I don't know if we have any Argentinas here. I always mess with the Argentinos, right? We have somebody like Carolina, right? I don't see a whole lot of Carolinas. Carolina is born in the US, and so are her parents. So now at this point in my career, I'm starting to see more Carolinas arriving at the university. Okay. So Carolina sits at home with abuela and they watch Pasión de Gavilanes every night. Okay. But they're talking, la abuela habla español, la nena habla inglés. Have you seen these conversations? And somehow they understand each other. La nena entiende la novela, but she doesn't speak Spanish, but she is a heritage speaker, right? Wouldn't you agree that she's different from Roberto, who came here at 10, right? And his parents are university educated and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Or somebody like Luis, que nace in Nueva York, but he goes back to Santurce, but he's very little. He's too little to go to school, okay? And somebody like Marta, who did first grade in Mexico. You see how, but they're all heritage speakers, y'all. They're all different kinds of apples. Do you see? And then the kind of kid that I see the most is a kid like Jose. Jose is either born in Chicago or he's brought here before 5. Now, why do I say 5? Because 5 is when you start schooling, right? So all this kid's schooling has been done in English in the United States, okay? Jose is going to be very different from Carolina, but they're all heritage speakers. What do you do if you have them all in the same class? And you've got a very different group. So I would like to know more about your students and where they fit according to these profiles. They probably won't match exactly, right, to each of these students. They'll have some differences, but I would like to know what your students are like. Now, I made this a QR code, but then Jill very smartly pointed out, if they use their phones, then they're going to have it on their phones. And what you want is for them to do it in their computers. So Jill, I believe, was going to put this in the chat. Is that right, Jill?
Yes, I just did. That link goes to a folder which has 6 documents for 6 groups.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is put you at random into breakout rooms. You're going to be assigned a breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And if you're in breakout room 4, guess which document you're going to open? Group 4. Got it?
I'm gonna make 8 actually, because it's
really?
such a
Okay.
big group. We don't want more than like 4 or 5 in a group. So there are now 8 documents, so you can open 8 rooms.
Okay, so I'm going to open 8 rooms. You're going to get sent at random to a room. And what I'm going to ask you to do is look at the different students, okay? And I want you to put them in order of their Spanish proficiency. Okay, do you remember? You're going to see them when we get there. We got Roberto, we got Jose, we got Carolina, we got Marta, and who am I missing? Carolina. You got 5 students there. So you're putting them in order, okay, according to what you think based on their circumstances. What do you think their Spanish proficiency is like? Do you think it's that little plantita? Do you think it's a big plantita? What's the order? And then we're very quickly going to reflect on what are your students mostly look like? Or maybe you've got all of them. I don't know. All right, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and put you into breakout rooms.
And how many minutes do we think we'll give them?
I think you can probably do this in about 10, let's say 10. And then if you need a little more time, we'll give you more time. All right. So we got to keep our chisme to the minimum at the beginning, y'all, and get straight to the task. Okay. So I'm going to give you 8 breakout rooms, and there we go. And go. Please go ahead and join your room. I'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
And Marisol,
Okay, now I'm going to jump.
Yep.
I'm going to jump from room to room.
Okay.
And okay, let me set my timer for 10 minutes. Normalmente lo acaban en 10 minutos, pero we will see how they do. Timer. You know what? I'm going to give them 11.
Okay.
Mande?
I was just going to say, Marisol, I made her co-host so she could jump to rooms as she requested
Yeah,
to.
I did the job last year. El año pasado fui a participar, ¿ok? Hola.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, muy bien, gracias.
Qué bueno tener otra experta aquí.
Siempre que Francisco Salgado sabes que vengo a algo tuyo, está muy contento.
Ay, es que Fran es un amor y que es tan trabajador.
No, es que es mi héroe, es mi héroe, es mi héroe.
Sí.
Yo lo adoro.
Sí, definitivamente. Bueno, entonces, a ver si me ayudas, Marisol, vamos de grupo en grupo y les apoyamos, ¿te parece?
Okay. Hasta luego.
Perfecto. Ok, hasta ahorita.
Hi, Nancy, are you here?
Come up with something different. Who came up with the same thing? Yeah, you came up with the same thing? Okay, Yvette, why did your group decide to put Marta ahead of Jose? Do you remember?
Sorry, me and Arlene are literally in the same room, so we have to like mute and switch off. Why did we put Marta and then
Ahead of Jose. Mm-hmm.
Oh, from right to left?
Like she's stronger. Ella está más
Right,
fuerte.
she is stronger because Marta still, first because she came later, vino a los
Correct.
7 años, and because
Right.
she has more contact with the language, right? She had bilingual schooling, se vuelve al rancho 5 veces, cada verano,
Right.
pasa un mes de verano allí. So we thought she has still, by 16, more contact with the language than Jose has
Mhm.
had, which like, se fue, like nació en Chicago, sus padres se criaron en México, pero se criaron en Estados Unidos, so
Ajá.
he doesn't have
Right.
as much contact, and the language at home, like mitad y mitad.
Ándale.
School, at home he's gone twice, pero no tanto tiempo, so we thought
Very
Marta
good.
was the strongest
Very good.
there.
Very good. Did anybody have Carolina somewhere different or Roberto somewhere different? My sense is that everybody got those two pretty much like that. Did anybody have a different order? Maybe for Marta, where I usually see some differences is between Marta. Some people put Jose ahead of Marta because he was in a dual immersion program. Did anybody do that?
We had Marta first and then Jose.
You had Marta ahead of Jose.
Yeah.
Okay. And was it because of the dual language schooling?
Yeah, because of the age too, because she was here at 7, she came here at 7, then then she was in Main Street for 2 years, and then she spoke mostly a mix with the brothers and friends.
Mm-hmm.
And Jose had more because he was in the dual language program. So
Uh-huh. Right.
I think he had more
And
contact with the language than Marta.
that could be. And this brings up an interesting point. I believe it was Luisa, your group, that you said, how are we defining proficiency? And I did that on purpose. I did not define proficiency. Okay. Proficiency can mean a lot of different things. Was I talking about academic literacy? Was I talking about la habilidad de hablar y contar lo que pasó en Pasión de Gavilanes? Like, what am I talking about? But I purposefully left that ambiguous so that you could decide. Yeah, this is what a lot of people tend to come up with. And I just want to make a quick comment about literacy. I have given this talk before, and I've heard people say something like, sí, bueno, pues ella lo habla bien, but she's illiterate. Illiterate in Spanish. Analfabeta in Espanol. And I'm like, okay, hold up. Here's the truth. If you are literate in English, any person, give me any person who is literate in English. They can read and write in English at some level. Okay, at some level. And they are also, they understand the Spanish language. Guess what? They are literate in Spanish. Okay? When they see these squiggly lines on a page or on a screen, you know what they do? They can see those squiggly lines and they go, because remember, they're literate in English. Do you see what I'm trying to say here? We have to be careful not to say they are illiterate. That is unfair and it's untrue. And it's very, very negative. Okay? Now, if we were heritage Chinese teachers, heritage Arabic teachers, heritage Russian teachers, entonces sí, right? Ahí encontramos muchachos who are super fluent. They can talk, but when they see the squiggly lines of Arabic on the page, they cannot extract any meaning from it. Does that make sense? That's what being illiterate means. Our students are not analfabetos. They might have a low level of literacy. They might write like a 5-year-old with a million spelling mistakes. Instead of writing, mañana va a ser un día bonito, they're not going to write V-A-S-E-R. They're going to write B-A-S-E-R. Okay? That does not mean that they are analfabetos. I really want to emphasize that. Okay, so what have we said thus far? We have said that heritage speakers' linguistic, affective, and educational needs are very different from those of second language learners, but that heritage speakers can be a very heterogeneous group in and of themselves. Could I please hear from two groups? I'd like to hear from group 2 and group 5. I just picked 2 groups at random. Group 2 and group 5. Could someone just talk maybe for 10 or 15 seconds about, did you get a chance to discuss cómo son los estudiantes de ustedes on that scale? Do you have mostly Martas? Do you have mostly Jose's? Do you have mostly Robertos? Or do you have everybody? All right. Could we hear from group 2 first, please? Grupo 2?
It was group 2. Oops. Tammy, you were in that group. Can I call on you? I think so.
Sure. I mean, I'm not a teacher right now, but I'm
Or
in various
Libany.
schools.
Yeah.
I'm in various schools. So I see all. I see all
Wonderful.
the different groups
Okay.
because I'm in like multiple schools all throughout the city. So we have
Wow.
SIFE, we have, students who are really highly literate in their home languages. So we have like a variety of different, learners.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. And how about Grupo 5?
Well, in group 5, we actually share that we see all these different kinds of
them.
students. Yes.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot of work, y'all, to have all 5 of those kinds of students, right?
Yes.
So here's the thing. when we have separate heritage speaker courses, okay, oops, perdón. We want to keep it just for the apples. We want to have separate courses. We don't want to let Jose or Carolina or Roberto or any of these kids take Spanish for naranjas, okay? We want to keep them in our apple course, okay? For the same reason that when I went to, all right, who went to high school in the United States? Who here went to high school in the United States? Okay. You had to take English in high school, didn't you? We all did. Okay. When you took English in high school, at least in my high school, we had a separate section for ESL students. Okay. That met their needs. Can you imagine if I went to my high school counselor and I said, yeah, I know I have to take English. It's required to graduate from high school. I want to take the ESL section. What would my counselor have said to me when I was in 11th grade if I said that?
It's too easy.
She would have said, no, you can't take that. It's not meant for you. Okay. This is the same logic why we should not let heritage Spanish speakers take second language Spanish classes. It's not made for them. Okay. And that's what we're doing when we allow them to do it. When they have Spanish proficiency, they shouldn't be in the orange classes. Now, in order to do this, and we're going to come back to this next time, you need a placement exam. And that placement exam must be required and it must be binding. What do I mean by that? I've gone to a lot of college campuses where they say, yeah, we have a Spanish placement test, but they don't have to take it. And I'm like, well what's the point of it? It's just optional then. It's just a suggestion. Okay. Furthermore, it needs to be binding. What does that mean? I've been on some college campuses where they say, yeah, we require them to take the Spanish placement test. And if it tells them they're a heritage speaker, they don't have to go to heritage Spanish. They can go somewhere else. Okay. Now, I understand a lot of places cannot do this. And I get that. And that's what we're going to address. Okay. But to really have the true kind of program that I think maybe before I retire, we will have all over the country, they will have placement exams that are required and that are binding. But we're going to now talk about what happens since most of us don't have that, right? Jill, did you have a comment?
Yeah, a few things. And so this will be interesting to think through as you're planning. I know programmatically, we're so glad you're all here and you're answering the call to open a separate track, right? So programmatically, will it just look like one class in fall of 2024? Right. And if you have 300 ninth graders who are Hispanic, how do you decide which students, right? Is it a few sections, things like that? I'll also address, Karina had a question, high school used to have a bilingual program. What happened to those? We absolutely still have a lot of middle and high schools with bilingual programs. That is separate. And so Tammy and Coral really support those schools. Yeah, but yeah. Oh gosh, there's a lot of hands up now. So Kim, you decide if you want to take questions now, but I just wanted to share that.
I think maybe we'll leave those programmatic because then our next session is going to talk all about programmatic things. So I think if it's okay, I'll just muscle through my remaining, I guess I've got 12 minutes left, and then we can open it up to questions and we can decide which things to answer now and which things are better for when we're talking about programmatic things. I think the only other thing I want to say, and we'll come back to this, we frequently cannot force/require heritage speakers to go to this class that we so lovingly prepared for them, right? And they get to go wherever they want to go. So we will talk a little more about what can we do to entice them there? What carrots can we offer? We'll talk more about the seal of biliteracy. I know you all know what this is, right? And if two young women graduate from high school and they both say, I'm a heritage Spanish speaker, yo aprendí español en mi casa, yo hablo español, but one has the seal of biliteracy, I think we'd all agree he has a better chance of getting that job. So this is something we are aiming for. I've seen high schools be successful. They have their students make TikTok videos where they talk about, like, it's better to be in the heritage class. Don't go to the Spanish for oranges or Spanish for, ¿cómo se llamaba la güerita? Haley. Don't go to Spanish for Haley. Come to this class, right? But we can understand why sometimes heritage speakers don't want to go to the heritage speaker class. We talked about all the bullying that they've been through, right? They're like, oh, you have to write like Octavio Paz to be in that class, or like Isabel Allende, right? And I've been told my Spanish stinks, so I better not go to that class, right? So we get why they might not want to go there. And we'll come and talk about it. And this is where we get the mixed classroom. Now, I want to make something really, really clear. I don't know anybody who suggests that apples and oranges, heritage speaker, second language learners, must be separate for all of time. They never, ever may come into contact in the same classroom. Nobody says that, okay? What we're talking about is these beginning levels. We're talking about when Haley is still talking about Me llamo es Haley, okay? When she's still working on her initial levels, she's still in a nursery, okay? We don't want Jose there with all of his branches like, okay, this is not serving me. I need something else, okay? And what we're going to talk about here is the something else's that we can give these students. Unfortunately, we do still have a lot of mixed classes, right? And as you can imagine, Haley is like, oh my God, what is Jose doing here? His Spanish is so good. That's not fair. Not fair, right? But guess what? Research that I've conducted here in the Midwest and others have conducted as well show us that the heritage speakers are intimidated too. You know why? Because Haley gets an A on everything. Haley knows how to fill in the blank with the pluscuamperfecto del subjuntivo. And Jose is like, I don't know, it just sounds good. And then Jose gets a 70 on his test and he's like, órale, the güera got 100 and I only got a 70. My Spanish really is as bad as everybody says it is, right? She's learning the right way. And then we get back into that question of prestige, right? And it's just, it's racist, okay? And then of course, here's a picture of me. Here's the teacher. The teacher goes crazy. It's an actual picture of me teaching a mixed introductory level Spanish class where I had apples and oranges. And it's like, how are you going to do this? Doesn't make any sense, okay? If you do have apples in your orange class, we'll come back and talk about this another time. You're going to have to differentiate your instruction. There's at least 4 different ways to do that. And I can share a really good article with you by the people that I consider the gurus of differentiated instruction. But what I would like to focus on in the 10 minutos que me quedan is, okay, you've got your heritage speaker class. Here we are. I got all my apples. I got everybody from Carolina all the way up to Jose, all the way up to Roberto. Like, what am I going to teach them? What should I be teaching these kids? Right? Okay. This is a book that I did with Florencia Henshaw. I think everybody here would agree. I don't think this is controversial that second language courses, these are the goals, right? This is what we want for Haley. Okay. Heritage speakers, we have a different set of goals. And what I'd like to focus on now, in the little bit of time I have left, is this right here. Language arts. Okay. What do we mean by language arts? Okay. Once again, sorry, who were the people who went to high school in the United States? Okay. And you took English classes here in your high school in the United States. Okay. Tell me something you did in your English class in high school in the United States, please. Just shout some out.
Read a novel.
Okay. You read novels. What else?
Sentence diagramming.
Ooh, that's old school.
Really?
I love that. Most
Comparative
people don't do that. Comparative essay. Love it. What else? I think that mostly covers. Monday?
Reading different books from South America.
Okay.
Poetry.
So this is the
Arlene
answers.
said research.
Yes. Yep. They start doing research papers, argument essays, all that stuff. These are the answers that I tend to get when I ask people, what did you do in your language arts classroom? Who went to high school in Latin America? Or España? Okay. What did you do in your clase de castellano? Your clase de español in high school? What did you do?
Read
Grammar.
a lot, grammar a lot.
Conjugaciones.
Lo mismo. You did a lot of reading. Okay. I think everybody agrees on what language arts means. Okay. So my argument, well, it's not just mine. It's a lot of people in the field. Our argument now is no te puedes aferrar a tu libro de español para naranjas. Okay. Eso no te va a servir when you're working with heritage speakers. You need to go to language arts. But let me ask you this. How many of us, when we went to college to learn how to become Spanish teachers, did they give us a class on how to teach language arts? No, they did not. Okay? If people, for example, want to become an English teacher, let's say my son's in college, okay? And I'll ask my students, who speaks the best Spanish? That's a trick question. I'll say, out of all of these varieties, who speaks the best? And what do they usually say? They usually say Spain. They say
Colombia.
Argentina. That's Colombia. Yes, they do. Right? But this is a trick question. Which is the best flavor of ice cream? Which is the best flavor of ice cream? Is there one? Yuli, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Strawberry.
Strawberry. And what about you, Araceli?
Chocolate.
Chocolate.
Mango.
Okay. Mango. Oh my God. So what if I said, you know what? Mango es incorrecto. Mango es un sabor de helado incorrecto. Mango is a poorly done chocolate. You'd be like, what? Mango sigue las reglas de mango. Chocolate sigue las reglas de chocolate. How are you going to tell me that mango is incorrecto or that mango is a poorly made chocolate? That's what we do. That's what we sound like when we tell our students, eso es incorrecto, right? They are speaking their variety of ice cream. Does this make sense? And this is something I like to point out to my students so that they get it, okay? I'm going to have to go quickly through here. Oh, by the way, AIGA is used by 36% of the people in Mexico. So if you ever get this, somebody in your Facebook sends it to you, AIGA no existe. What do you mean no existe? Millions and millions and millions of people use it. Of course it exists. What people mean when they say no existe is it doesn't have prestige. Okay? And I'm going to wrap up with something. It's going to be Justin Timberlake in a bathing suit. So let's all pay attention to that. I want us to think like geologists. What does that mean to think like a geologist? If you were a geologist, Carla, and you went out into the field and you saw a rock that you'd never seen before, would you exclaim, esa piedra incorrecta? Would you? No, Carla's saying no.
No.
Probably what you would say if you were a real scientist is, okay, well, there it is, right in front of me. Since I'm a scientist, maybe I'll try to understand where it came from. What were the conditions of light and pressure and time, etc., that made that rock exist? This is how we need to approach our students' Spanish. When they say something, we go, qué interesante. That's interesting, okay? We don't want to be this guy right here. So I'm going to ask for voluntarios o víctimas. Maybe Yvette, maybe you wouldn't mind reading the first panel. It starts with actually.
Actually, you're not in my book of animals. Therefore, you aren't a real animal.
Se imaginan. All right, Kaylin, can you do the next one, please, with subspecies?
Subspecies? Just a tiger that doesn't know how to be a proper tiger. So lazy.
Okay, Arlene, can you do the third one? That's a mistake.
That's a mistake. Your species should only have 9 bands. Educate yourself.
Ay, por Dios. And everybody, let's say the last one together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Stop
evolving.
This guy makes a terrible zoologist. And you know what else? He makes a terrible Spanish teacher. This is what we sound like when we tell our students que son incorrectos, okay? When you judge people, okay, based on their spelling, grammar, punctuation, and sentence structure, guess what? You are enacting one of the isms that we talked about at the very beginning. And I realize I am going a bit over time, so let me wrap it up. One rock does have more social value over another. So we have to teach our students about context. And how do we do that? I'm going to have to zip through all of this and get into the beach and wedding. If you go to this beach right here, on the count of 3, and it's not a nude beach, mal pensadas. If you go to this beach and what clothing would you wear? I want you to shout out one article of clothing you would wear. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Bathing
suit.
Okay, or chanclas or something like that. Now, what if Mr. Timberlake, in the evening, he had to go to this boda, right? Que parece ser en un templo, una iglesia. On the count of 3, please shout out something that Mr. Timberlake would wear. Here, 1, 2, 3.
Suit.
Okay, what would happen? Veka, Carla, Elena, Susan, what would happen if Mr. Timberlake showed up wearing this to this event right here? ¿Qué diría la gente?
Shock.
Shock. Well, I'd be there trying to get a selfie.
They wouldn't, because he's famous. They would take it as a trend.
That's very possible. Okay, let's see. Maybe he wasn't Justin Timberlake. Un tipo aparece ahí en la boda in a pair of swim trunks. I think what most people would say is, wow, ese tipo, que falta de respeto. He is dressed in a way that is completely, what word would I use?
Inappropriate.
There it is. Inappropriate. De la misma manera, if he wore this suit to this place, we would say that, right? Now, here's the last thing I'm going to say here today. Would you call this bathing suit incorrect? Would you ever use the word incorrect to describe his bathing suit?
Yeah.
No.
No.
The worst you could call it would be what? What did we say?
Inappropriate.
Inappropriate. Nuestros muchachos no llegan con un español de la playa. Okay? They come to us with beach Spanish. How do you want to react? Do you want to say, oh my God, ¿cómo te atreves? Quítate ese traje de baño, quémalo. I never want to see that again in my life. How dare you? Shame, shame, humiliation, bullying. Or do you want to say, ay, mira, mijo, at least no vienes encueradito. Ven, let's go to Macy's. Come on, let's go to Macy's. And then you try on, you expand their wardrobe. Does that make sense? And in our next sessions, we're going to talk about the ways you can add to their linguistic repertoires, not take away. That's what we want to do, is add to their closets and not shame them. We want them to understand that there's Tupac and there's Usted Pac. Okay, I stole that from the internet, by the way. Yeah, you like that one, huh? Yeah, I stole that from the internet, though. I can't take credit for it. Okay, this is our job, I think, as Spanish teachers. How do we grow our students' Spanish? Okay, so I'm going to have to conclude. I will share these slides here with you next time we are together. Okay, I am going to conclude with a book giveaway. This is the Oprah moment. Everybody, look under your chair. No, I'm just kidding. It's not under your chairs. But what I have are some books I would like to give you, but I will only give them to you if you fill out the questionnaire. What is the questionnaire? You will be receiving it in the email the next couple of days. Half of you are going to read that article I mentioned by Mike Pito. Half of you will be reading an article by Adrian Brandenburg. It is fire. These are both fire. And I'm going to ask you to fill out just a couple really short questions on the questionnaire. And if you do, you will get these 4 books for you for free in PDF. Okay? That makes sense? So you will be receiving an email in the next couple of days. I will see you on the 15th. And I think we do have about 5 minutes or so for any questions or comments. And Jill probably has some stuff to wrap up with.
Yeah, I need like 3 minutes, but any burning questions? I know Principal Armano has had her hand up.
Ay, perdón, disculpe.
Kim, la pregunta que tengo es, ¿por qué ha llegado esta conclusión de dar estas clases o empezar a reconocer el valor de los estudiantes a hablar español en este país? ¿Por qué ha llegado a llegar a este punto?
Pues por el crecimiento demográfico. Antes había unos cuantos y en el campo de la enseñanza del español realmente no sabíamos qué hacer. So, like, maybe lo ignorábamos or we just didn't quite know what to do. Or, peor todavía, decíamos que hay que corregir el español que ellos traen, hay que limpiarlo y mejorarlo. Then, the demographic growth came to such a tipping point that we finally, as a field, realized, wow, esa no es la manera de hacerlo. Y te estoy hablando de hace like 30 años, this has been growing and growing and growing. So now we have a legit field, okay? 30 years of research, publications on United States Spanish and the teaching of Spanish as a heritage language. So I think that's a fair answer to that question.
Kim, te quiero informar que yo fui una estudiante que vino a este país a los 12 años de Puerto Rico y hablaba muy bien el español y gracias a Dios que tuve maestros que me guiaron a coger clases de AP, literatura, y eso me ayudó muchísimo para yo poder entrar a buenas universidades y también conseguir trabajo. Yo creo que es tan importante que nuestros niños hispanos aprendan el idioma correcto, sepan escribirlo correctamente y hablarlo correctamente, porque eso le va a abrir muchísimas puertas al mañana para que puedan conseguir buenos trabajos alrededor del mundo, no solamente en Estados Unidos, pero alrededor del mundo.
Yo estoy de acuerdo contigo. The only thing I would change es lo siguiente. Yo no uso la palabra correcto, porque mango no es más correcto que chocolate. Mango tiene más prestigio que chocolate. Everything you just said, yo estoy de acuerdo si sustituyo la palabra prestigioso. Estoy 103% de acuerdo contigo. Nuestros muchachos tienen que aprender un español prestigioso. Y nuestras clases deben enseñar eso, agregando a lo que traen, no humillándolos, no diciéndoles que cometen errores, nada de eso, sino agregando el español de prestigio, porque efectivamente solo así van a conseguir los trabajos y pasar el AP y todo lo demás.
Usted tiene mucha razón. Yo creo que cada cultura tiene un potencial increíble y podemos todos trabajar unidos para llegar a que la gente entienda la importancia de todas las comunidades alrededor del mundo. Usted tiene totalmente razón en todo lo que ha dicho. Gracias.
Gracias.
Estamos de acuerdo. Qué bueno.
Let me jump in and share. This is absolutely what you're saying, agregar, amplificar, adding to our students' linguistic repertoire. So I'm really excited we do have new world language standards. Our students are communicating ideas with various stakeholders, with various communities. And in the future sessions, I am going to share what we're learning, examples from our cohort 1 schools. It's been a little messy this year. It's 6 schools, it's 2 middle schools and 4 high schools that have opened Spanish for Heritage Speakers programs for the first time. One of the middle schools ended up having a lot of newest New Yorkers, migrant students, so it's really a native speaker class. This is a class in Queens where the idea and the curriculum, and I see your questions about curriculum, and we'll make recommendations around that. Just getting students to be proud of the different ways they say certain things, right? So this is an example from Rashawn's classroom, right? And getting all the language out, all the authentic language from whether they're from Ecuador or Argentina or República, right? And then you're building from there because the literatura in Galeria and other books, it's from all over the Spanish speaking world. So they're going to see words that they might not know from their abuela, and they may not know from their mom studying abroad, something like that. So it's really important that we recognize their authentic language, like Kim said, and really, yeah, this was fun. Abuelas, everyone, they were just arguing about how you say different words, right? And so Kim, as Kim said, I'll send a follow-up email tomorrow with all these resources, and then let's do it this way. If your first names are A through M, you'll read the Mike Pito article. I'll make sure you have PDFs of both of those. And then the Brandenburg article. So thank you, Kim, for giving those to us. And I'll send the link to the survey. And then I put it in the chat, and I'd love for you to just use our Jamboard, right? So your final exit ticket reflection here, a little sticky note, what you're leaving with. And then I'll send tomorrow, if you don't fill it out right now, but the attendance and exit ticket here. So this is for CTLE purposes. So our CTLE is processed quarterly here. So thank you for your patience with us. You won't receive it right away, but please be sure to fill this out. But I'll send everything and all the links tomorrow. Okay. Kim, is that it right now?
Yep, that's it. I'll get the questionnaire off to you just as soon as I got to turn in my final grades today. And as soon as that's done, I'll get that questionnaire out to you. And I think you're really going to like these 2 articles. They're so wonderful and affirming, and they help us really see the importance of what we're doing.
Okay, muchísimas gracias. And thank you. And MS 158 team, I just want to thank you for being here. And also I'll send an email and we'll really talk in with Principal McHugh about what parts of this you are thinking about, how this lands with your Chinese speakers at your school. If you have heritage speakers of Chinese who are writing in simplified versus traditional, and then the different dialects within the Chinese speaking world. So I really want to help you think through what this looks like for your students there as well. So,
in fact, Jill, I have a PhD student now who just co-authored a textbook for heritage Chinese speakers. So I can probably get a copy of that for her and then share it.
Por favor. Thank you. Awesome. So I'll stop sharing.
Of course.
I'm actually going up to Hostos to visit a Spanish for Heritage Speakers class. That's a 4-credit class offered to Bronx High School students. So I can stay on for like 2 minutes, but just thank you all, and you'll get an email from me tomorrow. So gracias.
Gracias, gracias, everybody. You were a great crowd. You laughed in all the right places and did all the work. So thank you.